Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday once again, and this week we're asking you to leave Britney alone in horror movies. That's right, we're going to look at horror movies in which certain characters get much worse than they, or really anybody, deserve. See, deserve is an interesting thing in horror movies. A lot of the time, like, everybody's going to die in the horror movie because everybody's going to die in real life. But there are certain characters that deserve special death, like Shelley in Friday the 13th Part 3 deserved a special death that he never friggin' got. As opposed to McCullough in Friday the 13th Part 8 got every single thing he deserved by drowning in raw sewage. Ugh, just gross. Or say Piper Laurie, Carrie's mom in Carrie, got stabbed to death and then a house brought down on her because she raised her daughter to be insane, and so that's what she gets. But every so often, you get characters in horror movies that are just kind of throwaway characters. They're just there to be killed, and they end up getting a death that is way out of proportion to their screen time or their innate horribleness as a human being. And so we're going to look at 3 of those types of movies. Our menu is going to go in order of increasing horribleness visited upon our characters. So we're going to look at Final Destination 3, Jurassic World, and A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. The Final Destination movies are fun, if only because deserve has nothing to do with it. You were in this place and now you're going to die. It's actually a lot like, it's almost the American equivalent of J-horror movies where, you know, you see a thing or you're exposed to something and that's it. That's the end of your life. It doesn't matter if you could have avoided it or if there's something you want to do now. It's just you're gonna die. The gimmick, if you don't know, in Final Destination movies, our group of characters have somehow avoided a horrific disaster and death will not be cheated and eventually ends up killing them in usually Rube Goldbergian types of ways. So, in Final Destination 3, it was a roller coaster disaster, and the first 2 people that are killed right out of the box are Ashley and Ashlyn, 2 blonde high school ditzes that want to go get a tan. Now, the thing is, they are very clearly caricatures of horror movie stereotypes. The dumb blonde, the bimbo. We see them all the time. But man, they don't deserve what they got in this one. I mean, they were nothing to nobody. They weren't even particularly mean to anybody. They were just sort of in their own world in which they are, you know, fashion queens. So they didn't really do anything to deserve this. And what happens is the Rube Goldberg gimmick is they go to get tans and they get stuck in the tanning beds and die. But it takes forever because there's all sorts of who's what's about making sure that they're locked in the tanning, in the room with the tanning beds. And then there's all sorts of glitches making the tanning beds get hotter and hotter and hotter. And then by the time they realize what's happening and try to get out, they get physically trapped in the tanning beds, in which they start burning. I mean, think of the worst sunburn you got, and then think of first-degree burns that keep progressing to third-degree burns. As the tanning beds lose structural integrity, the glass starts breaking all around them, and they start falling through the tanning beds, cutting themselves up horribly, until finally the heat is so much that they burst into flames. Thus, you know, living up to their names as Ash and Ash. And these are the first people. Like, nobody in the movie dies as horribly as these first 2 girls, outside of, like, the actual disaster where everybody dies horribly. But it's like, they were nothing to nobody. They were barely even friends. I don't think they were friends with any of the people. They were just, you know, in the graduating class, and so they were on this school trip. And so it was just, Jesus God, why did this happen to them? And this is the best that's going to happen to these characters. It just gets worse. Next up, we have the recent Jurassic World, which I finally got around to seeing, and we're going to look at Bryce Dallas Howard's assistant, Zara. See, Bryce Dallas Howard, Claire, is way too busy running Jurassic World, you know, into the ground, to take her nephews who are visiting them, especially because their parents are getting divorced. But Claire can't really be bothered with any of this, so she assigns Zara to take care of them. And she's just kind of there. I mean, she's not particularly mean. She's, you know, trying to do her job well. She's an assistant. And so, and the kids end up ditching her because, you know, kids in a Steven Spielberg produced movie running off and having fun, but somehow never dying, which, you know, is okay in the Goonies, but everything else is kind of ridiculous. So when all hell starts breaking loose and you get like the big sequence where the pterodactyls are going after everybody, they manage, like the kids finally manage to meet back up with Zara just in time for one of the pterodactyls to grab her, bring her up into the air, drop her. So she was about to go splat, but then catch her again. So they're torturing her mentally, and they're just tossing her between a couple of different pterodactyls, you know, fighting over who gets to eat her. Meanwhile, like, she thinks she's going to fall to her death at any given moment, but then she ends up in the big underwater Loch Ness Monster pool. So at first, hooray, I'm away from the pterodactyls. I'm on, not exactly terra firma, but I'm in a pool. I'm somewhere where I can get to land and run away. But oh no, the pterodactyls start dive bombing into the water, like certain seagulls or albatross, I forget what bird does that. So she still has to swim for her life, trying to get away from the pterodactyls, but no, the pterodactyls get her again. And right as the pterodactyls are about to eat her, the giant Loch Ness Monster dinosaur just erupts out of the water and eats both of them. She was a nothing character. She's only in the movie for like 15 minutes. And you got like psychological torture, getting stabbed by all the little pterodactyl teeth, and then just swallowed whole. Not even as the giant Loch Ness Monster's actual target, but because you were unlucky enough to be in this pterodactyl's mouth when it got eaten. Jesus, guys. And finally, we have A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. The highest grossing Nightmare on Elm Street movie to date. I think maybe Freddy vs. Jason just beat it, but only just. Debbie. Poor Debbie. Played by Brooke Thies. She is one of Kirsten and Alice's friends. She's part of the group, but she's not, you know, the closest member of the group. She seems to be, like, part of the group, but she doesn't have any, like, real personal, like, best friendy connections with anybody except maybe the geek girl in it. But once the geek girl dies, she's just kind of there. And in Nightmare on Elm Street, when Freddy is coming for you, he always likes to go after you with the psychological torture angle as well. And so fairly quickly in every Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you're going to learn an identifying character trait about every single character. Debbie is a bodybuilder that hates bugs. So those are the two things we know. So when Freddy starts going after Debbie, who, much like all the other characters, is barely in the movie. Like, they're in it for like maybe 15 minutes of a 90-minute film. Debbie is dreaming that she's doing bench presses. Freddy shows up to interrupt her bench presses, and so they end up having kind of an arm wrestling match with the barbell going back and forth until Freddy breaks her arms at the elbows. Would just be terrible. Your arms are broken. You have no way to defend yourself, and since you're a bodybuilder, despite her not having any, you know, noticeable muscles, but, you know, actors, this is your thing, and now your thing is taken away. This is just the beginning. From the open fractures at her elbows emerge two gigantic cockroach arms. It looks a lot like this. Yes, they made an action figure of her. That's how horrible what happened to Debbie is. This is the first time they ever made an action figure based on a horror movie victim. So Debbie is running around going completely out of her mind because she hates bugs and she's got cockroach arms and she's been rendered completely powerless by Freddy, a guy that she completely did not believe in. Mainly because, would you? This is insanity that Alice and everybody are talking about. So she's running around, she's got her cockroach arms until she gets stuck in a very, very sticky floor, which is faithfully recreated right here. The sticky floor causes her to fall flat on her face. She can't really protect herself because she doesn't really know how to use her gigantic cockroach arms. And she gets covered in this slimy, sticky stuff, and as she tries to get herself, to extricate herself from it, she ends up ripping all of her skin off to reveal that she is a human-sized cockroach underneath. You have been turned into the insect you despise more than anything. Ugh! And then it's not over yet. And then the shot pulls back to reveal that she is actually in a giant roach motel being held in the hand of an equally giant Freddy Krueger who crushes her to death. So that's broken arm, metamorphosed into a cockroach, and then crushed to death for a one-note character in a horror movie that's barely in the movie. Why do we keep doing this to certain types of characters? It just, I mean, yeah, they're on the shallow end of the personality pool, but Jesus, did they deserve this? Oh my God. Ugh. Ugh, just terrible. I'll see you guys next week, hopefully with a more cheerful triple feature. Ugh.